Behold, the shadow president. I believe The Atlantic today actually just wrote a well-researched article on how, it's The Atlantic, you know, credit where credit's due, on how Stephen Miller is essentially the shadow president, which is not a new position. I've been saying it without the deep research they engaged in. Thank you very much. I knew it because it was told to me in a dream, but I guess the research backs it up. Miller's official titles, he is also the director of the Interagency Homeland Security Council, understate the full sweep of his purview. Steve Bannon, a former Trump advisor and Miller ally, describes him as Trump's prime minister. Remember, in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is the one who actually runs the government. The president is just the head of state. The president is just the one who represents the country. Miller has a role in nearly every area about which he cares deeply. Immigration and border security, yes, but also national security, foreign policy, trade, military action, and policing. He may draft a flurry of executive orders one day, lead a meeting on lowering domestic beef prices the next, and travel to deliver a fiery speech of his own. Miller declined to comment for the story. Right. We can read that entire article later, but I was reminded of its release as we look at this wonderful interview between Miller and Tapper. It's insane.
So a source briefed on the Venezuelan operation told me that a handful of American troops sustained bullet and shrapnel wounds, but none are life-threatening. Can you share with us how serious any injuries to American service members might be, and also any information you can tell us about any Venezuelan civilian casualties?
Yes. Well, let me take the second part first, which is that the overwhelming share of casualties and fatalities that were inflicted were against the Cuban guard that had exerted control over the people of Venezuela. So what many don't realize is that for years, Maduro stayed in power through an illicit deal with Cuban communists to provide his security because he didn't trust his own people to keep him safe. That is how much he was hated inside of Venezuela. So what our special forces encountered when...
It's a pretty common thing for dictators to do. Also, Cuban security forces are much better trained than Venezuelan. The Venezuelan military is just like guys. The Cuban military has people who were trained by Cold War, like Soviet special agents. So there's a difference in the general level of competency.
They did that daring midnight assault into Caracas, were armed Cuban guards, and they sustained massive numbers of casualties. I can't give you an exact number. The numbers that you've seen in terms of the Cuban guards publicly reported are probably lower than the actual number that were killed. To your first question, no, none of the, at least as I've been briefed, none of the injuries are life-threatening. Everybody is stable. And it just underscores the remarkable skill, precision, courage, and capability of our special forces. And I wanted to set the table one more time for your audience. I'm sure you've talked about it at length already. But the United States of America launched an assault force into Venezuelan territory, which has sophisticated air defense systems, which has sophisticated...
He really is very uncharismatic, huh? Don't worry, we're holding out on this for a reason. Wait, are we getting to Greenland in this clip? Or are they omitting... Wait, does this portion of the interview that's posted on CNN's YouTube channel include his statements on Greenland? Because I was hoping it would lead up to that, and now I'm worried that this is short enough that they're not doing that. Oh my God, do they not? Did they leave that on the table? Have the clip.
The president was very quick to say that the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, opposition leader Machado in Venezuela, doesn't have the support in Venezuela to become the next president or the interim leader. And I wonder where he got that from, given that basically her cutout, Gonzalez, won the election last year, 2 years ago, overwhelmingly. 70% of the vote or something like that. Why does the president think that Machado should not be the next leader? Why does he think she's weak?
First of all of Venezuela experts agree, that it would be absurd and preposterous for us to suddenly fly her into the country and to put her in charge. And the military would follow her and the security forces would follow her. This is not a serious...
So in other words, and it's so funny. I'm so happy that it ended up happening like this. There was some reporting that the reason why Trump did not pick Maria Corchado to be interim president in Venezuela is because he was upset that she didn't dedicate her Nobel Prize to him. But I said that's cap, because if he did feel that way, he would have mentioned it. The real reason he didn't was because Trump was informed by Marco Rubio, and I guess possibly Miller, that Maria would not be respected or allowed by the generals that still run the country, whereas the current VP, the current interim president, is respected and therefore would be a viable candidate. And it turns out that is precisely the truth. They could not have installed Maria without disrupting the balance of power over there. But funnily enough, Maria Corchado, after hearing reporting that Donald Trump was upset with her for not directly dedicating the Nobel Peace Prize to him, then said she wanted to. She was getting interviewed and she said, like, I want to.
Did you at any point offer to give him the Nobel Peace Prize? Did that actually happen? I had read that somewhere. I wasn't sure if it was true.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I certainly would love to be able to personally tell him that we believe the Venezuelan people, because this is a prize of the Venezuelan people, certainly want to give it to him and share it with him. What he has done, as I said...
Remember, she got the Nobel Peace Prize and dedicated it to Trump. Trump did not pick her for the Venezuelan regime change because she was not viable, but she is so desperate to run Venezuela that when she heard the false reporting, she ran to Fox News and was like, well, as soon as I meet with him, I would love to hand it to him myself.
It's a huge step towards a democratic transition, and I want...
But she's not getting it. She's not getting Venezuela. It's not happening. Anyway, we got to go back to Miller. It's so goddamn...
It's not even a serious question.
So should there be an
Look,
election?
Let me, if you give me the floor for 30 seconds, let me tell you what we are doing here, Jake. The United States, this is sort of foundational. The United States is using its military to secure our interests unapologetically in our hemisphere. We're a superpower, and under President Trump, we are going to conduct ourselves as a superpower.
It's getting crazy in here, guys. It's getting really, really, really crazy in here. The official position... So for one, obviously, this is like deranged Groyper speak, you know, channeled through Deputy Shadow President. I mean, we might as well describe him as he actually is. Chief, thank you. Chief of Staff. Yeah, Deputy Chief of Staff. It sounds deranged coming from the voice of an actual person speaking out loud. I can't talk today. But this is, I think, really... how do I put this? I need to, like... frame my thoughts properly. It's over. The official position of the White House right now is that everything in the Western Hemisphere belongs to us and that we have a moral right to take those things because we are a superpower. Essentially, we have abandoned moral arguments for imperialism. That's the gist of it. You know, the State Department posted this the other day, and I know they post a lot of stuff, but I think it's pretty meaningful that we've kind of given up on the pretense of making moralistic arguments for our behavior, and now we're essentially just making might makes right arguments at the face of things. Remember that even with the threatened actions in Venezuela, Greenland, and Canada, even when we threaten to invade or annex those territories or engage in regime change, we have made moral arguments. They have been bad moral arguments, but they're still moral arguments. The argument that Venezuela is sending drugs to America and that's an act of war and therefore we have no choice but to respond, that is a moral argument. I don't mean to say the argument itself is morally good, only that it's an argument being made of morality, right? Likewise with Canada, if they were the 51st state, you know, they would benefit so much. Or Greenland, we needed to oppose Russia or whatever. We needed to protect Europe. All of these are moral arguments. This and what Stephen Miller is saying here are not moral arguments. These aren't efforts to convince anyone. These are just naked expressions of power. Like, we can do it, therefore we must. This looks so pathetic too. It does look pathetic. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is Orifarm. It looks terrible. It looks so bad, especially like spoken out loud from the mouth of a real human being. You know, there's a reason normally stuff like this is constrained to the little dark age edits, but this is now the shift from the administration, an abandonment of moral arguments. I think things are going to get much worse much, 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 much worse moving forward. Vaush, there's something I don't understand. Last week, Trump was a lame duck president who wouldn't be able to do anything. Now he can do whatever he wants. They're one and the same. Lame duck presidents love to start wars. That's like the main, well, not the main thing they do. You can start a war unilaterally in the United States. You don't need Congress. Trump can't do anything domestically. He loses every court battle he gets into. He's lost public momentum. There's no support. He doesn't even seem to be able to go after his own political enemies. Internally, he is incredibly weak. But because Congress has ceded the power of the declaration of war to the presidency, he can do whatever he wants on that front. Isn't Congress supposed to be involved in this kind of operation? Yeah, that would be nice. Unfortunately, Congress ceded that power decades ago. I mean, his ICE seems to be terrorizing the populace pretty well. That doesn't mean it's not a lame duck presidency. What is ICE actually doing? Like, allowing a bunch of marauders to run around killing and raping isn't an expression of the authoritarian power of the president. If anything, it's the opposite, right? Like we said earlier, when Hitler was able to, he replaced his brown shirts with the Gestapo. He turned the lawless mob of ne'er-do-wells into a well-organized extension of state power. But ICE is not. ICE doesn't do anything. They don't change anything. They just hurt people lawlessly, senselessly. But that's not the same as changing things. Nothing can be built. Nothing is being structurally reformed, you know? Are Republicans in Congress in agreement with all this? With all this, do you mean this like realpolitik bullshit, our new imperialist behavior? Here's Rep. Ogles.
You know, the passage of military assets in that region, as you see the area, the sea becoming more, more traversable. It's important that we have a stake in Greenland, that they are quite frankly a protectorate of the United States, and not, they've been in participation or a relationship with Denmark. That needs to end. Denmark, we have spilt more blood. The United States of America has spilt more blood protecting Greenland than the Danes have. We have a greater vested interest in Greenland than, geographically speaking, than the Denmark, the Danes have. And so when you look at the Monroe Doctrine, when you look at the Western Hemisphere, we are the dominant predator, quite frankly, force in the Western Hemisphere. And that speaks to Venezuela, where I'll take odds with Senator Paul, my friend, quite frankly, is that, you had a dictator who was poisoning and killing Americans, and the President of the United States has sent a clear message. If you were complicit and killing Americans, we are going to come for you. And it was a military action, but it was on behalf of the United States, the American people, and our law enforcement capabilities.
Well, what can you
Wonderful. This is classic dying empire shit. Unfortunately, it seems like we're kind of speed running the process a little bit here. Yeah, let's just finish. Let's just finish the clip.
It is absurd that we would allow a nation in our own backyard to become the supplier of resources to our adversaries, but not to us, to hoard weapons from our adversaries, to be able to be positioned as an asset against the United States rather than on behalf of the United States.
Sovereign countries should be able to do what they want to do.
The Monroe Doctrine and the Trump Doctrine is all about securing the national interests of America. For years, we sent our soldiers to die in deserts in the Middle East to try to build them parliaments, to try to build them democracies, to try to give them more oil, to try to give them more resources. The future of the free world, Jake, depends on America being able to assert ourselves and our interests without apology. This whole period that happened after World War II, where the West began apologizing and groveling and begging
I don't even
and
know,
engaging these
honestly,
vast
what you're talking
reparation
about right
schemes.
now.
It's a
Yeah, man. America after World War II, famously a militarily abstemious nation, you know? Everyone remember 1946, where America put their hands up and were like, we're not going to do any imperialism? But to be clear, by the way, what he just said is, I say Nazi shit so much, and I'm always right, but like, straightforwardly, this is just a Nazi speaking. If you wanted to put a Nazi in a movie, and you had him in the American government, and you wanted him to give the speech that you would listen to, and you as the watcher of the movie are meant to interpret this as, oh, he's just speaking as a Nazi, not even as like an American, this would be that. When he says we became apologetic after World War II, I genuinely think he means Nazis. I'm not joking. Obviously, after World War II, America did a lot of stuff. We did a bunch of wars and regime changes. This makes no sense if you think of this as from the perspective of America, as in the America of post-World War II. He is thinking of what the German nation became after. I think he is thinking of like what the global Nazi movement became. It's very telling. It's very indicative.
What I'm talking about, Jake, is the idea, and by the way, you do, I know you love doing that smarmy thing, Jake, and I was hoping to be better than that this time.
Jesus, he's so defensive and easily angered. Tapper hasn't even done anything.
I asked you about if there should be an election.
Exactly.
I asked you if there would be an election in Venezuela. That's what I asked. I said, why was the president so quick to dismiss Machado? You answered that question. And then I said,
the objective, Jake, is security and stability for the people of Venezuela. With our help and leadership, that country will become more prosperous than it has ever been in its whole history. Venezuelans
but the
will
woman
be richer
running Venezuela
and
right
safer
now is
and
part
more
of the Maduro
secure and
regime.
better off. There will be conversations, Jake, about all of these guideposts along the way. The reason why I was giving you that speech, which I know you didn't want to hear, is because you're approaching this from the wrong frame. This neoliberal frame that the United States' job is to go around the world and demanding immediate elections to be held everywhere, immediately, all the time, right away. To create these vacuums.
That's not what I think, but you invaded the country.
It's funny how bad Miller is at this. I'm sure he's very convincing behind closed doors, but the moment he makes contact with a member of the media, all of that unhinged, like 4chan poll speak just lurches out of him with no control. So rather than making a calm case for whatever Hitlerite bullshit he wants to advocate for, he just like races ahead of every point to preemptively defend it, and it makes him look really, really weak. He cannot do it. No, he cannot do it. But this still marks a pretty significant moment, right? This is the abandonment of moral argument in favor of the president's actions, right? And we have gone from it would be good for us to do this to it is our right to do this, which is essentially like a pre-liberal way of I mean, it's perfect for a fascist, right? Like fascists didn't make moral arguments on behalf of the people they occupied, right? Sometimes they did for fun. Fascists say lots of stuff, but the reason Germany invaded France was not because they wanted to help the people of France, nor largely did they pretend it was. It was mostly just, we can, it's ours. Didn't his wife cuck him with Musk? We can only assume she did. Venezuela was promised to us centuries ago. Oh, well, I mean, the Israeli state is also based on a fascist myth. It kind of makes sense our government would go down this way. Hey, look at that, Whitey manifest destiny again? Yeah, to an extent. Though, in this case, some of the territory that we're trying to, manifest destiny our way into is owned by our European allies. I listen, okay, I cannot say this enough. I'm really not trying to do like the internet aura farming thing. This is very important, okay? To the fair nations of Europe, we are an enemy of the world and life itself. You have to treat us like one. You have to embargo the United States. You have made this mistake before with Germany, and you paid severely for it, okay? You have to embargo us. We are, in no uncertain terms, stating our intent to invade a European nation. The administration has not been unambiguous on this point. They have outright said, like, military options are not off the table. This is not, like... This is a very, very easy point, okay? I'm not expecting you all to go to war with us, because you probably wouldn't win, and also nukes and stuff. But at the very least, there have to be consequences to this behavior. Take Florida in response. I think that'd be fair. Do you guys want Florida? Denmark, do you want Florida? Nope. Funny tidbit on that, by the way. And I really, truly hope they're being serious with it. Denmark will shoot first and ask questions later if US invades Greenland. Please, 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 I beg of you, do not let it just be rhetoric, okay? Spain has also vowed to deploy troops to Denmark. It needs to be all of them. It's not even a response, just military doctrine. I mean, right now, the only thing Europe seems interested in doing in response to our behavior is monitoring our situation.
To the country, and we seized the leader of Venezuela.
Damn straight we did.
And I'm saying,
we're not going to let.
So is the U.S. going to have new elections?
Jake, is that we're not going to let.
This is the stuff of dead empires. This is when you have nothing left. You have nothing to offer the American people. You can't make their houses less expensive. You can't bring grocery costs down. You can't make education higher quality or more affordable. You can't make jobs more abundant. You can't fix the hole in the hearts of so many young men and women who think that they have no shot at making it in the world today. You can't get them houses. You can't do anything to make people more helpful. So instead of all those negative feelings welling up inside of you, okay, you need to focus on some big externalized source of triumph. No, no, no. We can't make your life better in any way. It's the ultimate concession. So instead, we need to get really ginned up about regime change in Venezuela and annexing Greenland. That's what we need to focus on. And like lemmings, everyone's following along with it. Here's from Matt Walsh. The benefits of acquiring Greenland would be very substantial. Da-di-da-di-da. Of course, Matt Walsh was another one of the many conservatives saying that the era of regime change and imperialism is over and that America first is the way moving forward. Obviously, like, they were all being disingenuous. It's just rhetoric to them. But this is like the final boss, right? This is our final boss. The concession on their end that they cannot make things better for anyone, so this now is what we must focus on. I do hope Miller does more interviews, yeah. He's very revealing, you know?
Tin pot communist dictators send rapists into our country, send drugs into our country, send weapons into our country.
Okay.
And we're not going to let a country...
You'll note from Miller, there's not an ounce of genuine anger in his voice when he talks like this. I've seen Miller angry. Miller gets angry when reporters ask him clarifying questions. When he's talking about drugs being sent to America, he just raises his pitch. Like he knows he's supposed to sound angry, but he's not actually, because he doesn't care about people. He's a sociopath. He's only interested in his own aggrandizement, you know? He has been that way his entire life. Remember that video of him gloating over U.S. torturing people? He's like on a school bus or something. He's only 32 years old. No, he's not. I don't know how old he is.
Fall into the hands of our adversaries. The future of Venezuela working with America is going to be so bright and so incredible and so positive, and we'll have a conversation about everything that you raised. But the priority right now, as the president has been made clear, is a judicious, thoughtful, careful transition process to secure a great future for Venezuela and to secure a great future for America.
All right.
And let's just take a moment and just acknowledge, Jake, that what we've witnessed under President Trump's leadership this last week is one of the greatest foreign policy and military victories this country has ever had.
Stephen Miller, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I don't know. That's all I really have to say. Obviously, Stephen Miller personally is completely deranged, but it goes so far beyond that. When they lose the ability to do anything internally to shore their numbers up, they have to jangle keys about something. Would the Pentagon even follow an order to invade a NATO country? It wouldn't have to be the whole Pentagon. There's no real war declarations anymore. More likely, the president would authorize, like, we would send carrier groups to surround Greenland, and we would send special forces detachments in to just sort of like mill about, and we would put pressure on people until eventually we would get them to like sign a document saying that they're our protectorate or whatever. It wouldn't be like a whole, Pentagon operation. Would the troops want it? I don't know. You go ask them. This is literally like when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands because the economy was weak. Yeah. Empires used to do this all the time. This was like the default thing they did, by the way. It's only been since World War II that the world has stabilized. Prior to that, like if you go back before, like, even to the 19th century or earlier, like our country is falling apart, we must invade. Look at what Mussolini did with Ethiopia. The invasion of Ethiopia was just a desperate effort on the part of Mussolini to try to gin up some of the enthusiasm and fervor from the veterans that he got his leadership off the backs of. The whole promise from Mussolini from the very beginning was, veterans of World War I, you who were lied to and betrayed and mistreated and not respected for your sacrifices, I'm your guy. And with me in charge, we will lead you and the nation to glory. And then he took charge and nothing happened. So what'd they do? They invaded Ethiopia, and it was a disaster. We're seeing the collapse of the liberal international order. And by the way, to be clear, I do think that right now the European Union is completely complicit in that collapse. You're basically cheering it on. As long as Germany, France, the United Kingdom, whatever else, refuse to take this seriously and denounce us and treat us as we are, an enemy nation, you are guilty. The reason you're not doing that is because you're too pussy to say anything that contradicts the political interests of the entrenched economic and political elite that you respond to. People who are basically the same as the people running the shots here in America, you need to have some goddamn balls. Otherwise, you have nothing to speak to us on. How smug do you think the people of the United Kingdom got to be when Chamberlain was permitting, and appeasing Hitler? Oh, wow, look at what a shithole Germany is. Yeah, you let him do that, man. Merz literally said they're going to defend Greenland. Nah, I've seen this pussy bullshit. Statement made by Macron, Merz, everyone basically. Arctic security remains a key priority for Europe and is critical for international and transatlantic security. NATO has made clear the Arctic region is a priority and European allies are stepping up. We and many other allies have increased our presence to keep the Arctic safe. The Kingdom of Denmark, including Greenland, is part of NATO. Security must be achieved collectively. All they're saying here is like, America, you don't need to annex Greenland. We're all helping with the defense. This is not what it should be, which is if America invades, we will shoot them with guns. Merz is in favor of the Venezuela shit. Of course he is. So is Macron. Of course he was. Okay, but nobody can actually step to the U.S. military? Yeah, but if European powers actually deployed defensive garrisons to Greenland, substantial ones, it would mean that the United States couldn't actually do anything without really declaring war and really shooting at our European allies. It would prevent them from making any half move. They would need to actually declare war. And if they did, then, well, there you go. We're at war over Greenland. Balls on the table. Balls on the table. Rubio is being summoned to Denmark to discuss Greenland. This is probably like a final nonviolent offer to take Greenland. The main thing that Rubio wants is Cuba. It's Miller who's more interested in Greenland. Smarmer's evasive responses to what the U.S. is doing in Venezuela. Ugh.
Some people might be puzzled listening to you say that you think America might not be in breach of international law over Venezuela. I can't find an international lawyer who thinks this is anything other than a blatant breach.
International law has to be the framework and the anchor, the benchmark, if you like, against which we gauge all actions of all governments across the world. It's important we don't lose sight of the substance here. The president was illegitimate, and the thing that we need above all else is a peaceful transition to democracy. That was the position of this government before the weekend. It remains the position of this government.
Donald Trump was asked about that just in the last few hours. He sounded much more interested in getting American oil companies into Venezuela in a hurry than he did in having democratic elections in a hurry.
Well,
that's the guy, isn't he? That's what he's like.
I speak for our government, and let me be absolutely clear that peace.
He is a slave to the exact same financial interests that call the shots over in the White House. The European Union, everything, their countries, their relative progressivism, their socialized healthcare, their lower retirement age, everything you guys take for granted and sneer at us over, all of it, it could disappear like that. Blown away like the petals of a dandelion, okay? As soon as they decide it's possible and useful to do so. And when they're done raping my country for its wealth, they'll come to yours. And there's plenty to take over there too, okay? Do not get complacent.
Transition to democracy is the #1 priority in Venezuela. That's been our position all the weekend. It remains our position.
If you think it's not happening, and if you think he's breached international law, would you be willing to vote the other way on the UN Security Council?
Well,
from America?
The Security Council, there's no resolution drafted yet, so we haven't got into that space.
But in principle.
But I do think that it's important to just look in here at the substance of the issue. The president was illegitimate. He caused untold misery.
The UK is assisting in the seizure of their oil tankers. So the United Kingdom is actually participating in Trump's mafioso scheme to seize these oil tankers and steal them and bring them to the United States to sell them so that Trump can create a liquid out of treasury account that he can personally use.
For people in Venezuela, and we need that transition to democracy, that peaceful transition. That, as I say, the position before the weekend remains our position.
But it's important also, isn't it, for countries like Britain to lay down red lines? Would it be a red line if President Trump decided to do the same thing in Cuba that he just did in Venezuela?
Well, the benchmark for this government will always be international law. The framework will be international law. And for the US or any government, it's for them to justify their actions.
As a red line. So people will say, actually, what you're telling those Labour MPs who are upset about...
It is kind of funny to see him treat us the way Biden treated Israel, though, you know?
About this, international lawyers who are upset about it, is actually, I'm afraid we've got bigger fish to fry, on Ukraine particularly, and you just got to suck this up. We're not going to do much.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I've been absolutely clear the framework is international law. I've been an advocate and argued for international law all my life.
Well, then this must offend you.
This hasn't changed. The situation is complicated. It's complicated even today. There's further developments in Venezuela. So the US will obviously have to justify the action that it's taken and is taking.
British journalists are so much more antagonistic than American ones. Yeah, but it doesn't do anything. Like, keep in mind, there's less free speech over there than there is here. You know, pensioners getting arrested over their Palestine Action protests. Their country is in total gridlock. Nothing gets done. Like, it's not as though it's led to anything, you know? If anything, a cynic might argue the reason that European reporters are allowed to be more straight to the point and more direct is because they have less potential to get anything done there. Whereas in the United States, if public sentiment shifts far enough on an issue, any changes made could be globally impactful.
But we mustn't lose sight of the fact that that peaceful transition to democracy is the single most important thing.
You must worry about the message this sends to Russia and China. They believe they can do what they like in their spheres of influence. That's been absorbing a lot of your time in the case of Russia. And he's doing the same thing in America, isn't it? Sending out an appalling message to those countries, isn't it?
Well, that's why, consistent with our allies, we are making the argument that international law is the framework, is the anchor, is the benchmark for any government around the world.
I noticed that all of the good question asking in the world isn't doing very much to get any good answers.